How did you get to New York City?
I originally came to New York City for college. I went to Pratt Institute about 10 years ago. I just remember visiting that campus and being like, of course I have to go to college in New York City. Like, I have museums, I have culture. I'm going to learn so much. And then I lived here for 7 years, and then I left and went to the Hudson Valley and lived in the forest for 4 years. Never thought I'd come back to the city. And then all of a sudden I said, okay, I think I'm ready to emerge from the forest and be around humans again.
Where are you from originally?
Rochester, New York.
You are?
Yeah, I'm a New York girl through and through.
What was the appeal when you first had that thought of, I want to go to college in New York? Why?
Well, I was going to school for design. And so knowing the value of going to school in a city that had some of the most incredible museums in the world was just like, and of course, it was so fruitful to my education. And I think, being a designer and an artist, we're so naturally curious about the world around us that, being in New York City and having the whole world here in that way was just that thought of, I know how impactful this will be to my career and my becoming of whoever I'm meant to be.
Were there specific museums that come to mind that you knew you'd be spending time in?
No, not at that time. I didn't know. But I did know that was a part of our history class, for example. They told us that your freshman year, part of your curriculum will be going to visit museums. And so, over time, for example, I fell in love with the Guggenheim. Just architecturally, I loved being in that building. And some of the more like design or museums like the Whitney and places like that. Yeah.
You have a fascinating story, and I know we talked for a while before we started recording, and you correct me if there's a better date or time on which to start the narrative or the storytelling about what you're up to now. You were telling me that I think it was your senior year, you ended up designing something that seems to have changed your life. I don't know if you want to back up a little bit before then, but if it makes sense to start there, what's the story of what you made that has perhaps a direct link between what you're up to now and then?
It's a very good question to ask about the timeline.
Yeah.
Because in my revelations of how impactful that was, it wasn't linear. And how, the story actually does go back, of course, to my birth or or to my ancestors. But it's good to start at that moment. So my senior year of college, I was studying industrial design, minoring in sustainability. And I just came to that design class with the question of how to help humans understand that we're nature. Like, what product could I design to help us realize that? And next thing I know, I'm making a coffin, and it's a biodegradable coffin that would be worked with in green burials, which is returning to the earth in a natural way. And it was made with macrame, which is weaving rope in different forms of knots, and done in a ritual. And it became this piece of, through bringing beauty and sacredness and ritual into a very challenging moment in life, we can return to the earth in a beautiful way. And remember that we are of the earth, and let's go back to it.
How do you make sense of how that idea came to you in the first place?
Oh, man. Well, definitely my healing journey with getting diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease my sophomore year of college was probably the most impactful thing of my life, of going through so many different kinds of doctors, so many different kinds of treatments, trying to figure out why am I ill in the first place. And my sophomore year of college, I was deteriorating to the point of, I remember going home at winter break, wondering if I was going to die because no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And I couldn't stay awake. I couldn't move. I could barely eat. And to then arrive to that diagnosis and then over the years be trying so many different treatments and pretty much leaning on all natural, holistic medicine for that, really began to open me up to what does it mean to heal with the earth and to learn how I can heal when I start to understand the rhythms of what it means to be walking on this earth with the seasons, with the elements, the weather. And so I think going through that at a very young age of, being 19, 20 and like not having this idea of what college would be and going into the depths of who I am in order to be able to live was so profound. And yeah, I can just definitely see how that brought me to that coffin. Because, in hindsight, now talking about the timelines, like when I look back, I was like, yeah, the amount of deaths that I went through in, having to grieve the death of my identity, of my body, of what I expected of being a college student in New York City, of what I thought my life would be like those were all little deaths that I had to grieve and process in order to heal. It's like, okay, here's now this coffin that can help like that big capital D death in life. And so that healing journey definitely has informed everything in my life.
Chronic Lyme disease. I know a very little about that. And I'm sure anyone who's listening to this would be interested in knowing the details of what happened. You just alluded to some of the symptoms, but what's worth sharing about what it was that you went through?
Chronic Lyme disease is a very complex disease. It's most known to contract it through a tick.
Yeah.
And, ticks are very small. So unless you're, at that time in my life, I didn't have that awareness to growing up, check for ticks like that when I was out in nature, growing up in Rochester. And so that's the most common way. There are other ways to actually contract disease, but that's the most common. And a part of that is when you don't find that tick bite right away and get it off and, take a month of antibiotics, that's when it begins to brew in the body. And that's when it becomes chronic. And one of the most common stories of someone with chronic Lyme disease is that over time, certain things start to feel off. Like when I look back in high school, I was like, oh, it started then, with different symptoms. And so it just kind of starts to build up. But because of the way that our society relates to health, that depression I had freshman year was like, go take a pill, or, oh, that pain you have is just because you worked out too hard. Maybe take it easy. Like it was just kind of brushing it off instead of really taking a moment to say, this is something's off here. And so I was just deteriorating kind of slowly. And one of the things that makes it very complex to diagnose is that it shows up differently for everyone. So some people have chronic fatigue, memory loss, depression, anxiety, physical pain like arthritis, gut issues, like you name it, you name the symptom out there and it could apply to Lyme disease. And so that's why it often gets misdiagnosed as something else. And so, the diagnosis process can be very challenging. And then because it is different for everyone, there's not one treatment that works for everyone. And in the holistic world, there's this understanding too that there's a relation between all of these different aspects that are happening within our body, all the different, microbiomes of the bacteria versus the virus and the fungal and all these things. And so they're all working together. And so you have to address what is taking place in your body and in your mind and your emotions at a holistic level. And so it's very, very deep. And because the Western medicine doesn't really recognize that, the CDC has not. There's not a lot of support. There's not, financial support. My mom spent like her whole life savings on my treatments, and I went into medical debt in my 20s in trying to treat myself. So yeah, it's very complicated. And so many of us that get it become advocates for it because, yeah, just like being on this podcast, like maybe I'll help someone because they didn't know and they don't have the doctors and support out there. So it's important to talk about it.
For you, what were the symptoms? You spoke about a couple of them, but what do you remember? What did you go through?
Definitely the depression, and the brain fog. Just like feeling I had fogginess and clouds like all around my brain, like not being able to think clearly. And then, all of a sudden, like feeling sick from eating all the time and getting like very bloated and just feeling like lethargic instead of like feeling energized from food. It would make me tired. And then most prominently has been the physical pain and more of the arthritic symptoms for me. I walked with a cane for 3 years, and that was all in college. And I ended up taking a year off of college because I couldn't sustain being in college and studying and working and taking care of myself. And so, yeah, the physical has been the most prominent for me.
Tell me about the pain. It's arthritic pain. It sounds like. What is that like? Where did that exhibit itself?
It's all over. Mostly in my feet and my hands, like kind of my extremities, I guess. And it changes often, even still today. And the thing that made me walk with a cane was this feeling of like my left foot feeling broken all the time. That really deep sense of like being disabled, of lots of like physical impairment, of not the full mobility. Like the way I describe it to people is like if you had 50% less mobility of your body, those limitations like that.
How was it formally diagnosed? And are you convinced that this is the proper diagnosis?
Yeah, definitely. If you pursue the Western route, it's very complicated with the blood tests. And so one of the first places I send people is to look for like a Lyme literate doctor. They literally call themselves LLMD. There's resources online to find people like that. And there's certain labs that have more in-depth testing, because it can be very common to get a false negative. And so, after many tests, I, definitely came back positive. And then in the holistic world, there's just many more different kinds of testing as well. So, yeah.
Once you got the diagnosis, what helped, if anything? How did you walked in the front door. You walked in my door. I had no idea about your history here.
Yeah.
What have you done that has, I'm sure it's many things, but what's the story of how you tried to get back to health?
Yeah, that will be a 3-hour conversation. So it's interesting at the time, when I finally got this diagnosis from a practitioner in Rhode Island, my mom got connected to someone and she's like, take the bus out here. And she's like, oh, you're young. You'll get back to health in 6 months. I was like, okay, let's do it. And so, she worked with, lots of herbs. There's very common herbs known in the Lyme world to address with that. And then, different holistic treatments that, work on like different levels of the body. And so I was doing that for many years. And then in all honesty, the biggest transformation was when I did find the Native American and South American indigenous lineages and their ways of healing with their medicines and their ceremonies and their understanding of healing as well. When I really began to reckon with my ancestral healing and even the traumas in my life that I began to face and how those needed to be brought up to the surface, to the light, so that I could see them and heal them and release them and honor them as well. Because all of that was what was also creating an environment for disease to thrive in the body. And so it became this place of, taking certain herbs and doing treatments to address the physical while also very much so addressing the emotional and the spiritual.
We were talking off the recording about some of the Native American rituals you've been through. Mm-hmm. I'd wonder if you'd be comfortable sharing what you've experienced. You talked about the spirit quest.
Vision quest.
Sorry, the vision quest. Mm-hmm. Anything you'd like to share about any of that, I think would be interesting to people who are listening to this.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have done is complete a vision quest ceremony, which is a 4-year commitment. It's there's many different ways of practicing it. The lineage that I follow is through a Lakota and Taino lineages, which are different indigenous tribes. And while many different vision quests are all different, there's an essence of going into the forest for 4 days, 4 nights. Sometimes the days different, the number of days differ. But for mine, 4 days, 4 nights in the forest alone, no food, no water, no tent, no fire, no anything except you and the nature and the divine. And it is a ceremony, so it's not something like that if I just went off and did that on my own. It's not a comparable experience. It is a whole ceremony, is many aspects to it that make it what a vision quest is, with deep prayer and community. And, if I can think about sort of the essence of a lot of like that ceremony, in addition to others, it is in that sense of when one has this desire to know more about the world, one must first know thyself. And so going into a place like that where all the distractions are stripped away and the only mirror to look at is your own, you really start to learn about who you are and the ugly and the beautiful. And when you start to really look at yourself is when that healing can really happen. And how when you're in that place of complete openness, you start to then be able to listen and see and feel the natural world around you and how the divine is speaking to you. And you begin to have these attunements to the finer energies of creation that can really help inform and support a deep healing. And so, I walked into my first vision quest in that place of very deep illness and was able to complete 4 years later, walking on my own and in a completely different place because of this transformation I had. And it's so profound.
How do you make sense of that transformation? I guess a more direct way of asking that is, what in retrospect has helped you heal? What are you convinced worked?
Well, one of my teachers in the Kundalini world that I practiced deeply for many years always said this one quote that always comes back to me of what you resist persists. And so a part of being in a healing space like that, in a container like that, deeply requires surrender. And once I was able to surrender to what was happening to me, instead of fighting it and ignoring it or being angry with it, I was then really able to listen to what is it here to teach me? Because the hardest moments of our life, no matter what it is, often become our greatest medicine and our biggest teacher. And so being in that place of surrender allowed me to start seeing the gifts. And so through that fortified my spirit and my body and my mind to say, okay, I'm going to keep healing because I know that this is making me a better person. And through being a better person, I know that I can help others more too. And so, that's not a linear path. I can definitely say that. It's a roller coaster of ups and downs, ins and outs, and different layers of that. And, even this day, I'm still learning deeper levels of surrender and acceptance. Just being in that place of acceptance of, okay, there's pain right now. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to be with it. I'm going to breathe through it. I'm going to love it. How do I love what's happening? Because if I can love this, that means I can love anything. And so really doing that deep inner work, I think, was what really opened the door for the vitality to start to re-enter my body.
How are you doing now?
It's an interesting question because I want to tell you, and I believe it, I'm doing amazing. I am so happy. I have a beautiful life and I live a very full life. You ask any of my friends, they're like, we don't know how you do so much. And then in all honesty, I live with a lot of pain. Just this morning, my hands were hurting, a lot. That was keeping me from typing. And so it's a very interesting place in relation to that place of acceptance and surrender where, ask me 5 years ago, I would have said I'm doing horrible. But through all of the work I've done, I can both experience pain and say, I'm fantastic. And to be then in that place of acceptance and love of who I am in this moment, in balance to still deeply committed and devoted to healing and, knowing that vitality is my birthright, is a beautiful place to be.
Is it that mostly your perspective is just noticeably different than it was 5 years ago? Or is the pain objectively been lessened by a form of healing as well?
It's both. I would say my daily experience is less pain, but I still have some deep moments of it. I had a big flare-up in April, and it was actually quite concerning. And I haven't had a flare-up like that in a long time. Last year, I had 3 weeks where my hands were like broken. Like I couldn't do anything. I had to have people cook for me and do everything for me, brush my hair. So it is, it's a bit of both. And I mean, I'm at a place in it where I fully know that it always ends. And so I don't get stuck there. I don't think it's the end of the world because I know it's going to end. I know something's going to change. And, where I'm at right now is being in this place of like, okay, if the pain can come on this easily, that must mean that the pain can go away that easily. So what is that? What is that medicine? What is that thing to do or to just be, to also be in that place? So
I want to get to the work you're doing now quickly, but I also would be remiss if I didn't ask you if you had a friend who came to you who had just had the identical situation you did, but they're 10 years younger than you. They're just looking for suggestions or advice. What would you tell them? Both Western-based medicine, anything else that you've experienced? What would you say?
Yeah, I would need to learn more about their life, honestly. to be able to fully give some advice, knowing that everyone's healing journey is unique to their own blueprint. However, there are certain things immediately that one can do to start creating an environment of health in their body through diet, through meditation, through Epsom salt baths, different, like on a physiological level, disease thrives in an acidic environment. And so, before you do any other major treatments or things like that, what are you doing in your home to support that? Drinking water, getting rest, which I'll be honest is one thing that I still am working on. But yeah, eating a good diet of, reducing those inflammatory foods, bringing attention to that in your life is usually the first thing I tell someone, because you could go take medicines, you could go do treatments, but those will only be as successful as what you're doing to support them.
I think you mentioned earlier that you experienced some small D deaths with this whole ordeal. Mm-hmm. And I know you were also saying before we recorded that after you made your first weaving, your first casket, it took you around the world. I want to move into that phase and get that story as it relates as well to your growing sense that there's something here that really resonates with you that you want to do with your life. You can take that however you want, but I'd love to get that Genesis story of that trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. In my journey over the years with death work, through the coffins, as a death doula, as a grief worker, I have come to that understanding, as you mentioned, as like the little D deaths and the capital D death, and we take our last breath, and how our relation to that capital D death really comes from our ability to move through those little D deaths in our life. And so in that way, how my healing journey informed that of, having to let die and grieve an identity of a 19-year-old girl in college, New York City, an identity of having a healthy body, identity of your expectations of what I thought my life would be. Like all of those had to die and had to be grieved so that I could let go and move forward. And what really came to me in relating to these things as deaths was understanding of the natural life cycle, where you have birth, you have life, you have death, and then you have rebirth. And so when I came into that knowing of, okay, after every death is a rebirth, then, that can fortify me, that can excite me to say, okay, I am going to let this die because I know that something better is coming, because a rebirth is always beautiful. And so that's how I started relating to those things. And so in that way, relating to death, how that brought me to this place of this coffin was, in hindsight, so beautiful to see how all of these aspects of my healing journey were informing what brought me to this death work. And so, that coffin emerged in design school to really try to support people embracing this important step of the life cycle. Because my question was like, can we fully know life? Can we fully love life if we don't know death? Because it's all the same cycle. We have to be in tuned and embrace every step of it. And so I made that coffin, and after graduating, was nominated to travel the world and to different design weeks. I went to Dubai and the Netherlands and South Africa, and then in New York. and was giving talks on this and exhibiting it. And it was, I mean, first off, just, being 21 and getting to travel like this is the most incredible thing for me. It was almost like a miracle after what I had been through with my health. Like, I had just gone through some dark times. Hell. And now here I am traveling to Cape Town, South Africa, being paid for to travel, treated like amazingly. And I'm just like, wow, these polarities are incredible. So grateful for that moment in my life to, be gifted those moments of light to then continue to sustain me, to continue my healing. But anyways, I was traveling, and through talking about my coffin and my work, it started opening up these conversations with the people there where they would come and just start telling me about, what happened when their grandmother died, or different stories that they had with death. And I very immediately realized how much I was learning about a person's culture through how they were sharing their death practices and funerary practices with me, because it immediately referenced our relation to food, our relation to song, our relation to prayer, our relation to family, our relation to community. And that was so exciting to see that, to say, wow, this is such a profound thing to be able to have these intimate conversations with people I have no idea, many cultures I didn't know anything about. And within 10 minutes felt like we had known each other for lifetimes. And so, I came back from all those trips with so much to integrate and reflect on. And so slowly, over the years, I said, I think these coffins they're something. There's something to do here, which brought me to wanting to make them and offer them. It was incredibly beautiful. A huge gift.
I don't know if any stories stand out, but when you were learning and learning about these different cultures and meeting all these different people, what do you still remember about what people would share about their own cultures that contrast with our own, and how maybe it started you thinking about how we might better think about death and dying and that the ceremony of death?
Absolutely. There was one conversation when I was in South Africa that I still remember to this day, where they were sharing that in their culture, the grieving is important, and not even important, it's required, where they will be at the funeral and it is a somatic release of wailing and screaming, and everyone is doing it. So hearing that in contrast to everything I had ever known growing up in the modern westernized United States world was incredible to hear. And it just, I remember hearing that story and being like, oh yeah, like this is amazing. Because they would share that, because by doing that, they would be okay. And the community and the family would heal together, that it wasn't someone left behind, because they were all in it together and they were releasing, and there wasn't shame around it, and there wasn't guilt around it. It's almost a strength to be able to do that. And that was very profound for me to hear, which has absolutely been resonant with all the work I've done since then. And then even talking to people where they say, your coffin's really beautiful, but I would never use it. Or this would never work with my culture. This would never work with my religion, or something like that. But even having those conversations were so incredible, because it was that understanding of, wow, like, we're all so unique. There's so much beauty in the uniqueness of how we approach everything in life. And so being able for them to say to me and honor the work that I do, and say, this is beautiful, but it's not for me. And how beautiful is that, to have that in your life? where we can respect someone else's culture, someone else's practices, someone else's beliefs, someone's art practices, and say then, hey, that's not for me though. And so, having that teaching early on was so important as well, because in that way, I understand that my coffin's not for everyone. I understand that the way that how much I weave ritual into my work is not for everyone. And that's so beautiful, because if you know that fully in your heart, that means you know who you are. And so therefore you can go find what works for you, and let's support that.
So there's the artistic component to this, which is you actually making custom-made individual caskets that you weave and offer to people. Then there's also the death doula component to this. You used this phrase earlier, and I'm sure there are people who will listen to this who have never heard that before. What is that, and what was the draw for you to get involved in that world?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, with the coffin, when I started really creating them, one of the parts of the coffin is the way that I can dye the rope, and with different colors. And so a part of speaking with a client is hearing their story of their life, asking them what are their favorite memories of their life, and then being able to maybe find a plant that symbolizes that or comes from that favorite trip, that lands of your favorite trip. And so then that becomes like that color represents so much beauty. And so then when you look at that coffin, like that family, that's a profound moment, because that's the last memory that you have of that person you love, is watching them lowered into the earth. And so even those little things of choosing a color that tells a story, choosing the plants that you weave into it, maybe you tie knots to that rope, tie notes to that rope of love. Like all of that you're putting into that ritual of that coffin is so impactful for that moment, because that memory stays with you. And so how to create beauty and love and sacredness in that can help support the pain that might also be there too. And so coming into that deep understanding of how profound the coffin actually is, definitely brought me to that place of thinking, I think I'm actually supposed to really be here for all of this. The whole place of supporting someone in their end of life.
How did you know that?
I mean, aren't there just things in life that you just know, where you hear it and you're just like, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but it does. So yeah, I mean, I'm 23. I think I'm supposed to be there for people's last breath. That's pretty wild. Oh my goodness. Gotta laugh at it all. Definitely gotta laugh when you're doing a lot of work about death and grief. But I think it was that understanding of, wow, there's so much beauty that I can bring to this moment, and knowing how there's, and witnessing the deaths that I had been a part of in my life with my family and friends, for example, and starting to, as I, learned more about different cultural practices, just thinking, wow, there's so many ways to really help a person dying and their family and their friends and their community, which looks different every single time. And so that person is called a death doula, or death midwife, also referred to as that. And so, most people, when they come to me, they say, well, I've heard of a birth doula, but I've never heard of a death doula. What does that mean? And the way I like to describe it is that birth and death are the same door, just matters which way you're walking through it. And so that doula is sort of a guardian of that threshold of that door. So whether it's a person that is a guardian supporting a baby coming into this earth, or a person that is guarding the door of a person exiting this earth, is what a death doula does. And, and they say, well, what does that actually mean? And that can look differently for every single person because of what are their spiritual religious practices. Once you start getting into that, the way that you honor what the body needs to do in order to support those journeys that they believe in. And also taking care of, like logistical things like paperwork and supporting a family through that, 'cause sometimes if they're in deep grief, like that's a lot for them to then deal with. But I would say also most often it is supporting in the emotional side of it as well, because the death doula is a non-medical role. And so we do not take the place of hospice. We do not take the place of nurses or doctors or anything like that. We're in support to it because we work as a team to be able to tend to those more emotional and then also spiritual aspects of the dying process. While the medical world is maybe supporting the more physical side of it and like, the safety of it as well, making sure that they have what they need. And, so like I said, how that's different for every single family, because maybe there's resistance to deaths and that, that's something that I support with. And like, how do we, help support you accept what's happening to you as a dying person, which can be very deep work. Maybe there's family dynamics that are being brought up, because what I have found is that within families, a lot of things that maybe go unsaid, unhealed throughout life, usually all bubbles up at death. So, navigating that, being a moderator, facilitator, space holder for those kinds of dynamics can be a part of it as well. My particular work where I'm most drawn to is in that way creating sacred space and ritual around it and honoring how profound it is. Because what is taking place is happening in both seen and unseen, dense and subtle ways. And so tending to all of those energies can support that dying person exit this plane in a peaceful way as much as we can to support that. And then tending also to, the people that are grieving that loss as well.
The casket itself, and I want to get to your Substack in a minute because you wrote a really interesting piece about a recent experience you had. The design of that casket, am I right that you get feedback from the family, from the individual, and then go build? In part, it's your design, but in part, it's their design as well. Tell me about that process of the actual artistry, the actual craftsmanship of making that, how and when it occurs.
The physical structure is the same for everyone.
Same design.
Same design. It's different for more of a adult-sized body than for an infant.
Yeah.
Like to call the ones for infants more cocoons. So the structure is the same, but which for adult is a wooden base. And then the macrame weaving is kind of laid on top of them, which I find so beautiful because in comparison to a more conventional wooden box style, you get to see the form of the body. And there's like that relation to that, to say, oh yeah, like my loved one is right there. So that's one of my favorite things.
The wooden base. So
like a wooden base to carry the body.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's something structural there and for the logistical movement.
Yes. Yeah.
You got to think about that too.
For sure.
It's not all ritual and love. It's also like, how do we carry a body?
There's physics involved.
How do we move something like that weight? So yeah, that's where like the ritual and the artist and then the very structural designer all come into play at once. But to your question about how it changes with each family, like I said earlier, with choosing a color to dye the rope is one way. But one of the original intentions and things that is the most important part of it is that it is co-created.
Yeah.
And so that one requires time to be able to weave that ahead of time, which encourages families to plan and accept what is happening, because often death doulas and us will get calls, the day before, the day someone dies. And so a part of my work and my awareness, like this podcast, is encouraging us to all, no matter where we're at in our life. I mean, gosh, we all know, like, look out in the world. We all know that life is not guaranteed. And to not be from a place of fear, but to be in a place of gratitude. Like, wow, I get to wake up and breathe every day. And to know that by talking and thinking about death doesn't actually make us die. That's the opposite. It's actually, by talking about and thinking about it, actually helps us live more fully because I'm not avoiding something. So this little side note of one of the logistical things, and wanting to weave a coffin with a family does require some time ahead of time, like that. But in that way, that's to really engage family and even someone dying, depending on the situation, to weave it through me instructing them how to tie the knot. It's a very simple square knot. You pick it up very easily. And to then, depending on the family's spiritual practices or things like that, will change the ritual. But it could be, okay, as you tie this knot, put a prayer into it, put your love into this one, think about a memory and say it out loud. Like, let's do this all together and share the memories, because there's that understanding that the way I talk about it is like, what are we infusing into this rope? What are we infusing into this knot here? Because then we're wrapping your loved one in that love that you infused into it. How beautiful is that? To put your love around them. It's like that last hug. So that's a big part of it as well. In addition to, one of the things is, like, as an art therapy practice, is keeping the hands busy. A lot of the times at the end of life, people are sitting around. Yeah. And they don't know what to do. They want to be helpful, but there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do once we're in that portal. And so having that weaving can be so supportive to them, because it gives them a purpose in aiding in the end of life of their loved one.
So they participate with you, or they take over mostly?
It depends on the situation. Like, if I have sent them the coffin and maybe instructed them over line, because they're just doing that, or if I had brought it to them and taught them and then left, or if I'm actually death dueling the whole process, tending to the body before and after the death, maybe guiding the funeral, like tending to all of it, and then I'm really there, then I'm actually there as well, weaving it with them. So I'll often weave like a big portion of it, because it's a lot of knots. So unless there's someone that's super enthusiastic, I usually weave most of it, and then like allow them to add in their parts. But some people then fall in love, and like I said, it like gives them that purpose, and they really love. It's very healing.
I think you told me earlier that the experience you had with this boy you wrote about earlier this year was one of the most affecting things you'd ever been through. And you go into some detail about what happened in your Substack essay about it, but I'd love for you to share why it was so affecting and what the story was.
Yeah, well, first I just want to give my gratitude to the life of Kum Sunko, who was that baby that I doulaed, and his parents, Sophia and Dani, and give my deepest gratitude for them for allowing me into that profound moment of their life like that. It's an honor be in service to that. No one can see me right now, but I have goosebumps, chills, it's really moving. And so, yeah, sending all my love to them. And so I was asked to doula for this 14-month-old baby who was kind of born knowing that he would not live. And so they had gotten to that point where they realized that it was time to really start preparing. And so I ended up in that kind of 4-day portal of being there for the moment that he died, all the way through facilitating many rituals of tending to his body that day, including like washing his body, anointing his body, cleansing it, and then really just guiding the family to do that, holding space for that, to then weaving in those 3 days that we were there in the home, weaving his cocoon that he would be wrapped and buried in. And so I did most of that weaving. And then there was like a vigil that happened in the home where many people came and I was just there with the weaving, inviting each person to come up and weave with me and put their love into that. And yeah, many prayers happening in that time. And then to the last day where I helped facilitate the burial, and which was a 3-hour ceremony out in the forest at a green burial cemetery. And so it was very, very profound. Yeah.
What still resonates about it? Why was it so affecting? I mean, obviously it's an incredibly powerful moment for the people involved. What about it for you was so affecting?
I mean, being around the death of a baby, makes me very emotional.
I'm sure.
Because in the deepest pain that a mother and father and family can have, like in their life, like the greatest pain that my parents might ever have, I'm sure, from what I witnessed, to be able to see and witness that and allow that pain for themselves, to give themselves permission to allow that pain, while also at the same time honoring how sacred life is. In that moment, like everyone having the deepest gratitude for every single breath that they are given in their life is so profound, because the lessons are so deep when tending to a young one like that. And that's always what I come back to when, people come to me and they say, isn't what you do with your life like really morbid? Isn't that really horrible? Like, how do you do that? Doesn't it make you depressed? And it's like, no, not at all. It makes me love life so much. Like, it's so beautiful. And so, tending to something like that was huge. And to support a family that had very beautiful ceremonial spiritual practices in her life, and to be able to weave those into, all of what we did. It was so profound and gave me a deeper understanding of really what this work is. In my spiritual practices, making offerings back to the earth is very important. In many lineages around the world, making offerings is what creates that reciprocity with the earth that also is the medicine for all the extractiveness and the extractive consciousness that humans have had and how much we've taken. So we have to make offerings, whether that is through our songs, through making offerings of flowers back to the earth. There's many different ways to make offerings. And it's very important to rebuild that balance here on earth. So many of the, spiritual leaders and lineages around the world, like that's what they're doing to support the earth in this transition and crisis that's happening here on the world. And so that's a part of my life, always making offerings. And what I wrote about in that Substack, that was a very, very deep process for me, was having the understanding of how our bodies, when we go and do a green burial, is our greatest offering that we have. Because I'm saying, here, Earth, take my oxygen, take my nitrogen, take all the nutrients that are in my body and decompose me so that I can bring nutrients to this earth, so that I can help fertilize the soil, because I want a beautiful tree to grow above me. And I want that tree to bring oxygen to everything around it, to be a tree that someone can sit under and read and have moments of peace in their life, to really feel like, wow, what an offering that I can give at the end of my life. I've really felt that with him and how important that was in what we were doing. I mean, we filled his grave with flowers, with fruits, with songs, because it was an offering to the continuation of life. And so it's not in that way, of glorifying it at all. Like, we're not glorifying death. We're not welcoming it. We're not saying like, oh, let me go sacrifice myself on behalf of something else. Like, not at all. And so I always want to make sure I'm really clarifying that, which I think I do in the Substack essay. And it's more about when it does come, because that's literally the one guarantee that we all have in our life, is that death is going to come. How can we make it the most beautiful thing ever? Because that beauty has ripple effects beyond what we know.
What has all of these experiences around death? As you just said, it sounds like it is it has a vitalizing effect on you, or clarifying effect on you. It brings you vitality and appreciation. It sounds like. How has you're around more death than almost anyone, certainly that I know. How does that experience affect you typically, in terms of your own perspective on your own life?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm certainly a crier. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I cry at a lot of things. And so, I am moved by death, versus what maybe people assume sometimes, where like, I honor those in the medical world that are around it even more than me.
Yeah.
That have to sometimes numb themselves in order to sustain, to be able to continue to show up. I honor that work a lot. So I get moved for sure. And it brings me to my knees, and it humbles me a lot, because every single death, no matter if it's, a bird that I find, a squirrel, a human that I know, a human across the world that I don't know, I mean, it really moves me. And so for me, that is really important, to remain grounded, to have my practices that nourish myself and purify myself as well. And so I'm very diligent with tending to my mind, body, and spirit, so that I can continue to have a strong nervous system to show up for the sorrows that come with death. Yeah.
Do you think it inspires you to live? That there is this perspective of being around death that is a reminder? I think many of us just sleepwalk in thinking that we'll always be alive.
Yeah. I mean, how many people do you talk to that all of a sudden someone really important to them dies in their life, and then they realize how precious life is? It's a very, very common thing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my work is also, how can we acknowledge how precious life is before that moment? Because often that moment of we didn't realize how precious life was maybe comes with regrets, because we didn't say the thing we needed to say. We didn't have the experiences we wanted to experience, because, we maybe weren't present with the fact that we're going to die. And maybe we were always reaching for something, always thinking about the future. Oh, I don't have this now, but if I work really hard, I'll have it then. And in that way, never being fully present and in gratitude and love for where you are right now. Like, that is the ripple effect of pushing death away and having a fear of death and not acknowledging it. And so, talking about death is very important in that way to help people, including myself, absolutely love their life now. So that by the time I get to my death, I can say, wow, I'm ready to go. I can walk through that door with grace and ease because I feel so good about what I did here on earth. And, that's a complicated thing to say. That's easy. I 100% acknowledge that that's easier said than done. There's a story of a Buddhist, very well-known Buddhist death teacher, or a Buddhist that teaches about death. And he, Buddhists, like, that is a huge part of their life. Like many lineages, ancient lineages around the world, most of the spiritual practice is actually just to prepare for their death. Because they know that by doing that, they're informing a very beautiful life. And so he had been, go through all the initiations, all the meditations, all the work to be at peace with death because he's in peace with his life. And then I can't quite recall the exact story, but, had a stroke or had a heart attack or something and was met with death, and all of a sudden was overcome with all this fear and anxiety. He was like, what? Like, I didn't think that this would happen to me. Like, and that's a humbling moment. Like, that was really humbling for me to hear that story. To say, okay, yeah, it's easier said than done. Like, so I'm not here trying to say that I'm on this, like, spiritual high horse that because I'm around death all the time and I meditate on my death all the time and I have planned my funeral, like, that doesn't mean that by the time it happens that it's going to be the most beautiful thing in the whole world. So, because it can be so humbling because we don't know what's going to happen at that point. But not being so fixated and attached to what is to come, but through that place of surrender that we don't know. Yeah, how can it inform and enrich a beautiful life now?
I had a guest on a week ago or so who a year ago had a brain aneurysm. She's an artist in the city, and if she wouldn't have lived so close to a world-class brain surgeon, she probably would have died. And these people are sort of prophets because they've been to places that most young or young-ish people haven't yet. And I asked her what I'd love to ask you, which is, given these experiences you've had being around death so much, what have you put a greater priority on, and what have you either cut out of your life or has dropped to a much lower priority level?
It's such a potent question for what happened in my life this week. So I'll just explain that to answer your question. I live a very busy life, many, many commitments, such beautiful commitments. I'm so grateful to be so abundant in all the things that I am doing in my life. And I was sharing with a friend how much I had to, how much I chose to accomplish this week. And it's like, somehow it was not all going to happen. He's like, can you deprioritize? What can you deprioritize? And so I looked at all the things I had signed up for. And it was such a beautiful moment because many years ago, I would have said, oh, I won't go see my friends. I'll cut out that part so that I can get my work done. And this week I was like, absolutely not. Because at the end of the day, my relations is everything I have. Like, all my relations are the point of it all. So it doesn't matter if I get all that work done or do all these other things if I don't have the people to share it with. Like that's definitely where I've come to in my life. And so I'm very grateful for that, to have that understanding of that my family and my friends and my communities, like they're the nutrients for my life.
So that's what you prioritize or have relationships.
Yeah, this week, absolutely. And yeah, always. But really coming into that understanding this week was really beautiful. Like that conscious awareness of that, and say, yeah, I'm going to choose this, because everything in life is a choice.
How about cutting things out? Has there been something, or might there be something that you're chewing on that you want to lower in your priority list?
It's a really hard question for, I don't know how much you're into astrology, but it's a very hard question to ask an Aries who likes to do it all. That's what we're known for. So, very fiery, ambitious people. It's not so much like cutting things out. It's more just being in complete patience of the timing that they all happen. Where maybe I used to say, it has to happen now. It's like, what is that? Why does it have to happen now? And, what I shared with you earlier of coming to this place of asking myself, if nothing else changed in my life, would I be happy? And being able to confidently and fully say yes is so beautiful. Because now I don't feel like I have to rush to get anything done. But in that way, I'm also so devoted to it. And so I can continue to do all the things without cutting them out, but with just much patience and neutrality. And it's like the slower I move, it's also somehow the faster it all happens, because it's not at a place of tension and stress. It's at a place of pure love.
Last question I'd love to ask you is, and I'm sure this is one you get a lot. You mentioned earlier that, I forget exactly how you phrased it, but that, there is, in death, there is rebirth, I think was the word you used. What is your view on, and then you just alluded to the fact that we don't know. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'd love to close by asking you what your current perspective is on what is through that door, if anything.
Yeah. Well, the first part of my answer is that I believe every lineage that has a belief is right, because it's your belief. And so in that way, I do cross paths in my own personal beliefs across many different lineages of spirituality. Many of them have overlaps, which is really nice. But yeah, for me, it's like whatever you choose to believe is beautiful. So it's an interesting work as a death doula to also be able to put aside what you believe in order to support someone else too. But I absolutely believe in what we call the web of life. That is just the web of all, like almost like the macrame net of everything that is alive in all of multiple realms of creation. And so in that way, I am very connected to the soul, and it's the soul's journey that it goes through in the afterlife, and whether that has many names to, heaven or the garden, or just returning to the light of the universe is definitely present for me. And then also the quantum physics belief that energy can be created nor destroyed. And so in that way, if we understand that we are made up of energy, and that is what our soul is, that is what our spirit is, then that also cannot leave. And so whether that comes back and incarnates in another life, whether that stays out in the cosmos, in the light, is the great mystery of it all. So, but I think, I mean, in my experiences in my own life and what I have witnessed, one of the beautiful things of death is that while the human might die, the relationship doesn't. And so if one does relate to the soul, there is that still place of being able to be in relation with that person that has crossed over in different ways, in subtle ways. Yeah. So whether you call it the afterlife, whether you call it heaven, hell, so many names. I don't put a name to it. I call them all these names because I think they're all there. That's why it's so beautiful to, in my life, walk as a bridge across cultures, because for me, it's really beautiful to weave how similar they in fact all are. Like, let's stop seeing the differences and seeing actually how similar all of our beliefs are. So no matter what you call it, there is for sure this continuum of life in this cosmic dance that we have.
I want to sneak in one final question, which is a lot of the artists I meet and talk to say very similar things about when they found whatever their art is that they've now been doing, many of them for many, many, many years. It was sort of like a homecoming, a sense that this was what they're supposed to be doing. And they have committed themselves to doing whatever that thing is. I know you're early in this journey, but do you get the sense that the artistry with the weaving, with the casket making, the death doula work, that this is what you want to do? This is what you're here to do?
100%. I mean, in relation to the question of what happens after death, like, because I believe in the soul, like, I know that this is my soul's purpose. Like, this is my dharma here on earth, is to support and bringing sacredness and beauty to the end of life and into the grieving practices, and to help heal our relationship to that. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about if that's why I'm here.
How do you know that?
I mean, we all have these experiences in life where something comes so easily to us versus how other things come harder.
Yeah. And
so, like, begs that question, why? And, you know, as someone that does believe in many having past lives, you know, as that question of, is this the first time I've ever done this? You know, am I just remembering something that is very ancient within my blood, maybe that my ancestors did, and I'm just remembering how to do that. And so I'm awakening that. And by doing that soul work, I'm actually healing my ancestors and my karma. And so there's just that feeling of like, yeah, it comes, I mean, I started doing this at like age 20. Like, that's wild. And
so there's a feeling of rightness or correctness. I mean, the image that comes to mind is like a puzzle piece that fits.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a super passionate person. Like, I always say, I really hope that in my next life I can be a DJ, because I would love to be able to be a DJ. I just can't find time to do it right now. You know, and so you know, there's so many things that I'm passionate about. Even my own personal art practices, like all these things. And but at the end of the day, if I had to choose one thing, it's always coming back to death and grief. It's just what brings me the most fruitful experiences in life and meaning. Yeah, like it's just what is. And to just have so much gratitude to like really know that, like to have difficulty explaining why you just know something. It's just something you feel. And so I really pray for that for everyone in their life, that they can experience that knowing, that clarity, that like embodiment. Like it's not just a thought, but it's a feeling, it's an action that you have. And it's just, this is right.
Shaina, thank you.
Thank you.